Hey everyone, Rich here with a full 4K HDR look at the recently released Detroit Become Human demo, running here on the PlayStation 4 Pro. Now, as usual, before we go on, let me explain that you'll need a high dynamic range display and a YouTube HDR compatible playback device to see this video in all of its glory. Everyone else gets a presentation tone mapped back down to standard dynamic range, but you get to keep the pristine 4K output quality. Now, this is my first hands-on with Detroit, and I came to this one as a skeptic of sorts. I appreciated the technology of games like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, but wasn't particularly keen on the stories or the gameplay, if I'm being completely honest. But I've been really enjoying this demo, and of course, tech-wise, Quantic Dream has always delivered the goods, and Detroit is quite the showcase here. The demo kicks off with protagonist android Connor sent to defuse a hostage situation, and we're immediately treated to a look at the quality handling of materials and lighting before this extreme close-up. Now let's stop here and take a look at this, because seriously, we're not too far off CG quality here, are we? Skin rendering, subsurface scattering, light reflection in the pupils, hair rendering, texture quality. You just can't really fault it. Some of the more extreme close-ups do reveal obvious geometry detail like this. So we have a perfect circular coin in this scene, but more noticeable polygonal edges on Connor's fingers and nails. Now, it really is only on extreme close-ups that this is kind of evident, but as we move into the next shot, we're back to some phenomenal rendering here, subtle handling of light and a pretty stunning hair implementation. Now I'm going to skip ahead here to much later on in the demo where Connor is outside and in the middle of his hostage negotiation, because I want to point out the hair animation too, with the wind in full effect on the rooftop. Now, too often in games hair might look nice, but it's kind of like more of a helmet fixed in place with a ponytail dangly bit if we're lucky. But here the hair animation kind of holds up and looks great, helped immensely by Detroit's really decent anti-aliasing solution, which is pretty solid across the board, nicely integrated into an extensive post-process pipeline. I particularly like the way the direction is integrated so well with the post effects. Yes, there are a lot of cutscenes in this demo, all of them engine driven, and I love the way camera focus and depth of field are used to dramatic effect. Detroit really loves to show off its physically based handling of materials here, and in fact you get a great example of this in action right at the beginning of the demo, as Connor reaches down to rescue a tropical fish that somehow leapt out of the smashed tank here. Again, let's stop here and appreciate the quality of materials, the specular sheen, the depth of field. Post-process effects in general actually is pretty awesome. Other highlights? Quantic Dream offers up some nice sci-fi style lens flare that would make J.J. Abrams proud. And there's a nice little demo of the team's water shader on the roof here. I like the way the helicopter turbulence displaces the water accurately. I've also got to give kudos to the UI too, vector-like, utilitarian, but flashy at the same time. You get a quick taste of it here when you first scan the room to find the captain for your briefing, but it really comes into its own when analysing the crime scene, amassing evidence and extrapolating out reconstructions of what led to the android Daniel taking a hostage in the first place. My only real complaint here is that some of the quarter circle motions required to access objects don't seem to activate when you want them to, which does take you out of the experience a touch until you get it right. Some of the gestures, like interacting with the touchpad to swipe a tablet in game, also come across as rather contrived too, but there is a sense of genuine investigation and evidence gathering going on here, and it's all about empowering yourself with knowledge before taking down the rogue android. And this leads us on to what I reckon is one of the demo's most compelling features, its replayability. Chances are your first ending will look a bit like this, with Connor rescuing the hostage but failing in his negotiation, sacrificing himself to ensure Emma's safety. I mean, you get a mission successful prompt, but you kinda want Connor to live, right? It's pretty easy to get a good win here by snaffling a dropped gun and shooting Daniel in his tracks, but the way the game presents this conclusion again makes it feel like a failure. And finally, I did manage to talk Daniel into letting Emma go by earning his trust, which earns him death by sniper. Again, mission successful, but for me it still feels like a failure. Now, what I like about this is that in the process of collecting evidence before the face-off, you're also building empathy with Daniel. Now, I've not managed it yet, but I want an ending to this scenario where everyone walks away, and helping you to do that is this flowchart, an extension to the vector-like UI I talked about earlier. It effectively highlights the key choices available in the scenario and where they might lead without giving away too much about what you're supposed to do. It's also very Android-like, if you will. I can't really see this mechanism sitting well in prior Quantic Dream games, but as an AI-like assessment of the scenario and potential outcomes, I think it's a pretty good fit. Okay then, so I've played this demo through in HDR on both the standard PlayStation 4 and the PS4 Pro, so let's talk about the different implementations here. I think Quantic Dream has done a fairly decent job here actually. The base console delivers Full HD 1080p resolution and is feature complete in terms of the asset quality and the range and scope of the rendering pipeline. Everything is here and it looks beautiful. PS4 Pro delivers the exact same content, the exact same assets, and does so using 2160p checkerboard, delivering an extra layer of sheen to the quality of the presentation. Now, checkerboard quality tends to live or die in how it handles motion, and in this demo at least, you're not looking at fast action overall, so the quality holds up pretty well. I'll be interested to see how it holds up more generally across more content. Next up, let's talk performance, bearing in mind that the Pro is natively rendering twice as many pixels, then extrapolating them out to a full 3840 by 2160 frame buffer. I was concerned that we might see some dips in performance on Pro that we don't see on the standard console, and we did kind of see that to a small degree in God of War. Let's begin with a look at the standard PS4 here. Yup, the standard console gets the standard 30 frames per second, properly frame paced thankfully, with 33 millisecond per time persistence, but there are some minor drops. In truth, a lot of them seem to be storage related and kick in after cutscenes or when moving into the main hostage area on the rooftop. But there is some other minor slowdown. I say minor because you can actually look at the frame time graph and count the individual frames being dropped here. Hardly a big deal. And because Detroit isn't exactly a fast-paced action game, chances are that dips beneath the 30 frames per second target will indeed pass mostly unnoticed for most players. Moving on to the Pro, and well, yeah, it's pretty much the same state of affairs, just with that 2160p checkerboard output. There's the target 30 frames per second, proper frame pacing, but there are similar drops, and yet again, some of them do seem storage related in nature, with the Pro possibly stalling a touch on streaming new data just like the base model. Overall, I'd say that the experience from the demo at least is pretty much on par in performance terms between the two PS4 machines, which is to say, not too bad at all. However, if you stack up the base console and the Pro simultaneously, head to head, what you get is a performance level that's actually a touch smoother on the supercharged iteration of the PS4. Now let's move on to Detroit's HDR support, something I was keen to test out because it's our first look at how an accomplished tech outfit like Quantic Dream can handle the next generation of displays. It's an interesting one this, because while we really do have limited material to work with here, I think the developer is kinda aiming for correctness over an all-singing, all-dancing HDR implementation. We are in a muted environment overall, but you do see some nice highlights on neon and specular elements, but that's certainly not overblown or in your face. There's also limited tweaking available to the HDR with only a fairly limited brightness control to work with. Nothing like the separate paper white and luminance controls seen in Assassin's Creed Origins, which for my money remains the best HDR configuration I've seen. And the HDR here is the same whether you're on PS4 or Pro, as far as I could see, and there's no performance penalty on either of them for using high dynamic range instead of the standard SDR output. So yeah, let's wrap this up then. What I've seen so far via this demo is promising overall. It's still very much a Quantic Dream game with the usual QTE elements and sometimes odd controls, but I love the setting here. The visuals are highly accomplished and there's a good mechanism in place for getting a ton of replayability out of the game. Now, despite only offering up one limited scenario, there's clearly a ton of ways to play Detroit, so yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more. But that's it. As always, do like and subscribe to support Digital Foundry's work, but that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching.